Their lips don't curve the same way anymore when they see you coming. And you've noticed it, haven't you? That shift. The way the warmth drained out of their expression like someone unplugged something vital. Those smiles they used to flash at you, so easy, so dismissive, so dripping with that nauseating condescension that made your stomach turn. Yeah, those are extinct now. Replaced by something colder. Something that smells like recognition wrapped in dread. Because here's what happened that they'll never admit out loud. You caused damage. Real, structural, irreversible damage. Not to their bank accounts or their reputation or their Instagram following. No. You damaged something far more fundamental. You cracked the foundation of their entire self-concept. The story they've been telling themselves about who they are and where you rank in comparison. You didn't just edit that story. You burned the whole damn manuscript and forced them to watch the ashes scatter. And the most wonderful part? You didn't do it with cruelty. You didn't scheme or manipulate or tear them down with petty revenge. You did something infinitely more devastating. You became undeniable. You evolved into someone their worldview couldn't contain. And now every time they look at you, they're forced to confront the gap between who they pretended to be and who they actually are. That's why the smiles are gone. Because you're not a cute little project anymore. You're a threat to their entire narrative. Let's talk about what those smiles really were. Because I need you to understand this on a cellular level. When people look at you with that warm, patronizing affection, that, oh, how sweet energy, they're not actually seeing you. They're seeing a version of you that makes them feel superior, safe, confirmed in their position above you in whatever hierarchy they've constructed in their mind. Those hot smiles? They were radiating confidence. The confidence of someone who believes they've accurately assessed your ceiling, your potential, your trajectory. They looked at you and thought they had you figured out, cataloged, filed away in the harmless drawer of their mental cabinet. Something to pat on the head before moving on to serious matters with serious people. You were their benchmark for, at least I'm better than that. Their proof that they were doing okay because, well, look at you down there being all adorable and limited and stuck in your little lane. They smiled at you the way someone smiles at a puppy. Pure, unthreatened affection for something that poses no challenge to their dominance. But here's what they fundamentally miscalculated. They confused your silence for absence, your patience for inability, your strategic restraint for permanent limitation. They thought you were cute because you were small. Turns out you were just coiled. The damage started the moment you stopped performing the version of yourself they needed to believe in. See, people construct elaborate narratives about the people around them because those narratives serve a purpose. You being less than them wasn't just observation. It was load-bearing architecture in their ego structure. Every assumption they made about you was a pillar holding up their sense of self. I'm smart because they're slower. I'm capable because they're struggling. I'm special because they're ordinary. I'm on the right path because they're clearly on the wrong one. Each of those assumptions was doing critical work, holding up the ceiling of their self-esteem. And you systematically removed every single pillar without even trying, without even meaning to. You just grew, evolved, became. And in becoming yourself, you demolished their entire structure. Now watch what happens when someone's ego architecture collapses. They don't just feel bad, they feel existentially threatened. Because you weren't supposed to be capable of what you're now doing effortlessly. You weren't supposed to possess the qualities they pride themselves on. You weren't supposed to access the rooms they thought were reserved for people like them. Your existence in your new form is a direct assault on their identity. Every win you have isn't just your win. It's evidence that their assessment of reality was catastrophically wrong. And if they were wrong about you, what else might they be wrong about? Maybe they're not as perceptive as they thought. Maybe their success isn't as impressive as they believed. Maybe their position isn't as secure as they assumed. That's the wonderful damage. You forced them to question everything. And look, I need you to understand something crucial here. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about tearing people down or proving them wrong out of spite. That's surface-level thinking. What's actually happening is so much more profound and, honestly, so much more devastating to them. You became authentic. You stopped compressing yourself to fit their narrative. You stopped dimming your light to make their mediocrity feel acceptable. You stopped playing small to preserve their comfort. And in doing so, you revealed something they were desperately trying to hide even from themselves, the gap between their potential and their reality. See, when they looked at you with those condescending smiles, they were really looking at a mirror they'd carefully angled to show them only their best side. You were the comparison that made them look good, the control group in their personal experiment of success. As long as you stayed where you were, they could tell themselves they were exceptional. But you moved. You evolved. You transformed. And suddenly that mirror isn't angled right anymore. Now when they look at you, they see what they could have been if they'd pushed themselves. What they could have become if they hadn't settled. What they're missing because they chose comfort over growth. Your transformation isn't just your story. It's their accusation. Every level you rise is a silent indictment of every excuse they've made. Every skill you master is proof that the barriers they claimed were insurmountable were really just failures of courage. Every milestone you hit is evidence that the path they said was impossible was just difficult, and they weren't willing to walk it. That's why the smiles are gone. Because you're not making them feel good about themselves anymore. You're making them feel the weight of their own untapped potential, and that weight is crushing. Let me tell you what you see when you watch them now. It's subtle, but once you recognize the pattern, you can't unsee it. There's a hesitation that wasn't there before, a calculation happening behind their eyes when you enter a room. They're not sure how to categorize you anymore, and humans get real uncomfortable when their categorization systems fail. The casual dismissiveness they used to deploy so effortlessly? Gone, replaced by this careful distance. This measured interaction. They're not relaxed around you anymore because relaxation requires a sense of safety, and you've become unsafe, not because you're threatening them, but because your existence is challenging every story they've been telling themselves about how the world works. Some of them have shifted into this weird competitive mode, trying to reassert their dominance in small, petty ways. That's not strength. That's panic. That's someone desperately trying to rebuild the hierarchy you accidentally demolished by just being yourself. They need you back in the box, back in the role, back in the position where their superiority made sense. But you can't fit in that box anymore. You've expanded, evolved. You're not the same shape you used to be. And trying to compress yourself back into that old form would be like asking a butterfly to crawl back into its cocoon. Possible? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely not. Advisable? Hell no. Others have gone the opposite direction. They've pulled away entirely. Distanced themselves. Suddenly they're too busy to connect. Too occupied to engage. And here's the truth they won't tell you. They can't stand being around evidence of their own stagnation. Your growth is a mirror. And most people hate mirrors when they're not prepared for what they'll see in them. The ones who stayed. Watch how they interact with you now. There's a wariness, a respect that tastes slightly like fear. They've recalibrated, adjusted their entire approach because the old playbook doesn't work anymore. You can't patronize someone who's operating on your level or above it. You can't smile down at someone who's looking you dead in the eye. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. That wonderful damage you caused, it's not actually destruction, it's revelation. You didn't break something that was working. You exposed something that was already broken. Their confidence was built on a false foundation. Their superiority was performance art. Their entire sense of self was constructed on comparisons that required you to stay stagnant. That's not your fault. That's not your responsibility. That's their fundamental failure of self-concept. They built their identity on relative positioning instead of absolute value. They measured themselves by how much better they were than you instead of measuring themselves against their own potential. So when you grew, their entire measurement system collapsed. The yardstick broke. The scale malfunctioned. And suddenly they're floating in this void of uncertainty, desperately trying to figure out who they are if they're not better than you. And, here's the part that's going to sound harsh but needs to be said. That's their problem to solve, not yours. You don't owe them your smallness. You don't owe them your stagnation. You don't owe them a version of yourself that makes their mediocrity feel acceptable. You tried that already, didn't you? Whether consciously or unconsciously, you played that role for a while. You made yourself less threatening, less impressive, less intimidating. You dimmed your light and compressed your personality and softened your edges because you could feel their discomfort, and some part of you wanted to preserve the peace. But here's what that cost you: authenticity, growth, self-respect. Every moment you spent making yourself smaller to accommodate their fragility was a moment stolen from your own evolution. Every time you downplayed your achievements to make them feel better about their lack of achievements, you reinforced a dynamic that was killing you slowly. That damage you caused to their existence, it happened the moment you decided your existence mattered more than their comfort. And that's not selfish, that's survival. Let's talk about what you actually did, because I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit for the scope of this transformation. You didn't just change surface-level things. You didn't just get a new job or lose some weight or learn a new skill, though maybe you did those things too. But the real change, the one that caused all this wonderful damage, was internal. You stopped seeking validation from people who were never qualified to validate you in the first place. That's massive. That's revolutionary. Because those hot smiles they used to give you, some part of you was addicted to them. Even though they were condescending, even though they were dismissive, they were still attention, still acknowledgement, still proof that you existed in someone else's awareness. Breaking that addiction meant confronting something terrifying. The possibility that you might need to exist in your own authority. Define yourself by your own standards. Validate yourself with your own approval. That's lonely work. That's uncomfortable work. That requires looking in the mirror and asking yourself who you actually are when you're not performing for an audience. You did that work in the dark, in the silence, when nobody was watching and nobody was cheering and nobody was giving you gold stars for progress. You dismantled the version of yourself that was built for their consumption and started constructing something authentic, something real, something that didn't require their approval to exist. And the thing is, when you do that kind of deep internal work, it shows. Not in obvious ways. You're not walking around announcing your transformation, but there's a frequency shift, an energy change. People can sense it even if they can't articulate it. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You occupy space differently. You stopped apologizing for taking up room. You stopped hedging your statements with qualifiers. You stopped making yourself digestible for people who weren't willing to expand their palate. You became indigestible, undilutable, incompressible. And that's what broke their reality. Here's what they're dealing with now, and I want you to understand this because it'll help you make sense of their reactions. Every time they encounter you, they're forced to do painful emotional mathematics. They're calculating the distance between where you were and where you are now. They're measuring the gap between your growth and their stagnation. They're confronting the reality that time passed for both of you, but only one of you used it to evolve. That math doesn't work out in their favor. The numbers tell a story they don't want to hear. So they have a few options. They can acknowledge their stagnation and do something about it. They can get mad at you for making them feel inadequate. Or they can retreat into denial and pretend your growth isn't real or isn't impressive or isn't sustainable. Most of them are choosing options 2 and 3 because option 1 requires courage they haven't cultivated. It's easier to resent you than to respect you. It's more comfortable to diminish your achievements than to be inspired by them. It's safer to tell themselves you got lucky or you're overcompensating or you'll crash eventually than to admit that you made different choices. And those choices led to different outcomes. But here's the thing that's eating them alive from the inside. They know. On some level, beneath all the denial and deflection and defensive posturing, they know. They know you earned this. They know you worked for this. They know you sacrificed for this. They know you became uncomfortable and uncertain and vulnerable in pursuit of this. And they know they weren't willing to do the same. That knowing is the wonderful damage. It's a splinter in their mind they can't remove. Every time they see you, it pushes deeper. Every time they hear about your progress, it twists a little more. Every time they're forced to acknowledge your competence, it reminds them of their own compromises. You're not trying to hurt them. You're just existing authentically. But your authentic existence is incompatible with their comfortable delusions. and that creates cognitive dissonance they can't resolve. So the hot smiles disappear, replaced by cold reality, by wary respect, by fear masquerading as indifference, by distance masquerading as busy schedules, by resentment masquerading as concern, and you just keep growing. I want to talk about something nobody mentions in these transformation narratives, the loneliness that comes with evolution. Because yes, you caused wonderful damage to their existence, and yes, their discomfort is proof of your growth, and yes, you should absolutely keep going. But let's not pretend this doesn't come with a cost. You outgrew the spaces that used to contain you. The rooms that used to feel like home now feel suffocating. The conversations that used to engage you now feel shallow. The relationships that used to sustain you now feel draining. You're not being arrogant. You genuinely don't fit anymore. And some nights, when it's quiet and you're alone with your thoughts, you might wonder if the growth was worth the isolation. You might miss the simplicity of being underestimated. You might feel nostalgic for the days when those hot smiles made you feel included, even if they were condescending. That's normal. That's human. That's the price of evolution. But here's what you need to understand. You can't go back. Not really. You could perform the old version of yourself, sure. You could compress yourself back into that smaller shape. Make yourself digestible again. Soften your edges enough to fit back into those old spaces. But it would be performance, not reality. And the part of you that's tasted authenticity would scream in agony the entire time. You've seen too much, learned too much, become too much. The old container can't hold the new you, and trying to force yourself back in would be an act of violence against your own soul. So yes, there's loneliness. Yes, there's a period of disconnection while you're between the old world you left and the new world you're building. Yes, there are moments when you question everything and wonder if you made a mistake by choosing growth over comfort. But look at what you gained. Look at who you're becoming. Look at the respect you're commanding, even when it's grudging and reluctant. Look at the standards you're setting, not just for yourself, but for everyone watching who hasn't found the courage to start their own evolution yet. You're not lonely because you're broken. You're lonely because you're a pioneer. And pioneers always walk ahead of the pack. That's the job description. Let me tell you what's happening that you might not fully recognize yet. You're becoming a standard. Not just a person, but a benchmark. A point of reference. A living example of what's possible when someone stops negotiating with their own potential. People are watching you even when you don't realize it, studying your moves, analyzing your choices, trying to figure out how you did it. Some of them are inspired. Those are the ones who will reach out eventually, who will ask questions, who will see your evolution as permission to start their own. Others are intimidated. Those are the ones spreading rumors, questioning your authenticity, waiting for you to fail so they can feel justified in their own inaction. Both groups are reacting to the same thing. You've proven that transformation is possible. You've demonstrated that stagnation is a choice, not a destiny. You've shown that the barriers most people accept as permanent are actually just difficult, and difficulty can be overcome with commitment and courage. That makes you dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in a subversive way. Your existence challenges the excuses everyone else is using to justify their comfortable mediocrity. Your progress invalidates the narrative that change is too hard, too risky, too unlikely to succeed. Every level you rise is an invitation and an accusation simultaneously. An invitation to everyone watching who's ready to grow. An accusation to everyone who's choosing to stay stuck. And the people who used to smile at you with that hot condescension, they're in the accusation category. They're feeling the weight of your success as evidence of their failure. Not failure to be you, failure to be the fullest version of themselves. That's the wonderful damage at its core. You didn't destroy them. You revealed them to themselves. And that revelation is forcing them to confront choices they've been avoiding for years, maybe decades. Some of them will use that revelation as fuel. They'll let the discomfort of seeing your growth push them into their own transformation. Those people will eventually thank you, even if it takes them years to find the words. But most of them will just resent you. They'll channel all that internal discomfort outward as hostility or dismissal or subtle sabotage. They'll tell themselves stories about why your success doesn't count, why your growth isn't real, why your transformation is somehow illegitimate. Let them. Their stories don't change your reality. Their resentment doesn't diminish your achievement. Their discomfort doesn't require your response. You keep climbing. They keep watching. The gap keeps widening. The damage keeps accumulating. And somewhere in the back of their minds, in the quiet moments they can't fill with distraction, they know. They chose this. They chose comfort over growth. They chose familiar over possible. They chose the hot smile over the cold mirror. You chose differently, and that's why everything changed. Here's something you need to hear. You don't owe them gradual growth. You don't owe them a transformation they can keep pace with. You don't owe them advance warning before you level up. You don't owe them permission to approve of your evolution. I know there's a part of you that feels guilty for outgrowing them, that wishes you could bring them with you, that wants to slow down so they don't feel left behind. But that's the old you talking, the version that made yourself smaller to preserve relationships that required your limitation to function. The new you knows something crucial. You can't force someone else's growth. You can't drag people into their potential. You can't love someone into evolving. All you can do is live your truth and let them decide how they want to respond. Some people will rise to meet you. They'll see your transformation and find inspiration in it. They'll use your growth as evidence that their own growth is possible. They'll step into their own evolution, and eventually you'll meet them on the other side as equals in a way you never were before. But most people won't. Most people will choose the comfort of their current position over the uncertainty of growth. They'll rationalize their stagnation, justify their limitations, and resent you for making them feel the weight of their own potential sitting dormant inside them. And, you have to be okay with that. Not cold or callous or indifferent to their pain, but clear about your boundaries. Their discomfort with your growth is not your emergency. Their inability to keep pace is not your responsibility. Their choice to stay stuck is not your problem to solve. You've got your own evolution to tend to, your own potential to unpack, your own becoming to facilitate. That's a full-time job. It requires all your energy, all your focus, all your commitment. You don't have bandwidth to also manage everyone else's emotional reactions to your transformation. So when they come at you with passive aggression or direct hostility, or subtle undermining, remember, that's the sound of cognitive dissonance. That's what it sounds like when someone's worldview cracks. That's the noise made by someone who just realized they built their entire identity on a foundation of comparative superiority, and you just removed the comparison that made them feel superior. Let them make that noise. Let them process that discomfort. Let them work through that cognitive dissonance. It's not your job to make it easier for them. Your job is to keep growing, keep evolving, keep becoming, keep causing wonderful damage to every limited narrative about who you're supposed to be, and what you're supposed to achieve and where you're supposed to stop. You know what the most powerful part of all this is? The silence. Your silence. The fact that you're not explaining yourself, not defending your choices, not justifying your growth, not apologizing for your transformation. You're just existing in your new form, letting your presence speak for itself. That silence is deafening to them, because they're used to people who grow feeling the need to announce it, to prove it, to seek validation for it. They're used to transformation coming with a PR campaign, but you just changed, quietly, thoroughly, irreversibly. No grand announcements, no motivational posts about the journey, no before and after comparisons, just the undeniable fact of who you are now versus who you were then. The receipts are in your energy, your competence, your presence, your results. And that's infinitely more powerful than any speech you could give or any explanation you could offer. Because it can't be debated or dismissed or rationalized away. It just is. You just are. And everyone who encounters you has to reckon with that reality, whether they want to or not. The people who used to smile at you with condescension, they're not smiling because there's nothing to condescend to anymore. You're not below them. You're not beside them. Depending on the metric, you might be beyond them. And that inversion of the hierarchy they took for granted is causing system-wide failures in their self-concept. Every interaction with you forces them to confront questions they've been avoiding. What if I was wrong about them? What if I'm wrong about myself? What if I've been coasting while pretending I was climbing? What if my potential is sitting dormant because I'm too afraid to pursue it? What if the limitations I've accepted aren't real? What if the person I dismissed as less than me is actually what more than me looks like? Those are existential questions, identity-level questions, foundation-shaking questions. And you're not even asking them directly. You're just living in a way that makes the questions unavoidable. That's the art of wonderful damage. It's not confrontational. It's not aggressive. It's not even intentional in most cases. It's just the natural consequence of someone becoming fully themselves in a world full of people performing half-hearted versions of who they think they should be. You became real. And reality is harsh contrast to performance. Your authenticity makes their facade obvious. Your growth makes their stagnation visible. Your courage makes their fear apparent. And they can't look away. They can't unsee it. They can't unknown what you've taught them just by existing. So where do you go from here? Because this is just the beginning, you know. What you've accomplished so far, as impressive as it is just foundation work. You're not even close to your final form. You're not anywhere near your ceiling. You haven't touched the edges of your potential yet, and that should terrify them. Because if this version of you, the version that's already causing wonderful damage to their entire self-concept, is just the prototype, the rough draft, the early iteration, if you're still building, still learning, still growing, still evolving, if there are levels to this transformation that you haven't even accessed yet, then the gap between who you are and who you're becoming is going to make the gap between who you were and who you are now look quaint in comparison. You're building momentum. Every day you're stacking skills, accumulating wisdom, deepening your understanding of yourself and your potential. Every challenge you overcome makes you more capable of handling the next one. Every level you rise gives you a better vantage point to see what's possible at the next level. This is compound growth, exponential evolution, and the people who are struggling with who you are now, they have no idea what's coming. They can't conceive of what you're becoming because they're still trying to process what you've already become. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need them to understand. You don't need them to approve. You don't need them to acknowledge or validate or celebrate your transformation. You're not doing this for an audience. You're doing this for yourself. The wonderful damage you're causing to their existence is just a side effect, a byproduct, collateral revelation. You're not trying to hurt them or humble them or teach them lessons. You're just refusing to limit yourself to preserve their comfort. And that refusal has consequences that ripple out beyond your control. So keep going, keep growing, keep becoming, keep existing in your authenticity, even when it makes people uncomfortable. Keep raising your standards even when it makes people defensive. Keep expanding your potential even when it makes people resentful. Because here's the truth they'll never admit, but you need to understand. Their discomfort is proof of your evolution. Their cold distance is evidence of your heat. Their loss of those hot, condescending smiles is confirmation that you burned away everything false about how they saw you. And in the process, you burned away everything false about how they saw themselves. That's not something to apologize for. That's not something to diminish or downplay or feel guilty about. That's the most generous thing you could possibly do for them, even if they'll never recognize it as a gift. You forced growth. You demanded authenticity. You refused to participate in the comfortable delusion that stagnation is acceptable and potential is optional. Some of them will eventually thank you for that, years from now when they've done their own work and stepped into their own evolution. They'll look back and realize that the discomfort you caused was the catalyst they needed, that the wonderful damage you inflicted was actually wonderful healing in disguise. But most of them won't. Most of them will carry that resentment to their graves, never quite forgiving you for being brave enough to become yourself while they remained trapped in the performance of who they thought they should be. And that's okay too, because your transformation was never about them. It was always about you. The cold reality they're facing now, the reality that replaced those hot smiles, is this. You're not who they thought you were. You're not what they decided you would always be. You're not contained by their assessment or limited by their expectations or defined by their projections. You're a variable they miscalculated, a force they underestimated, a presence they can no longer categorize or dismiss or patronize. And every day you wake up and choose to continue this evolution, you cause a little more of that wonderful damage. You crack a few more foundational beliefs. You challenge a few more comfortable assumptions. You demolish a few more carefully constructed narratives about who gets to be powerful and capable and impressive. You're not doing it to them. You're doing it for you. But the effect is the same. Their smiles are gone. Their condescension has evaporated. Their easy superiority has been exposed as fragile ego wrapped in performance. What remains is cold reality. You're the standard they can't meet. You're the mirror reflecting everything they could have been, but chose not to pursue. You're the living evidence that their excuses were exactly that, excuses. And that's not destruction. That's revelation. That's truth. That's the wonderful damage that comes from someone refusing to shrink, refusing to dim, refusing to compress themselves into a shape that makes other people comfortable. You burned away the false narratives, all of them. Theirs about you, yours about yourself. And what emerged from those ashes is someone undeniable, incompressible, and absolutely unstoppable. So when you notice those cold looks replacing the hot smiles, when you feel that careful distance replacing the casual dismissiveness, when you sense that wary respect replacing the patronizing affection, don't question it. Don't apologize for it. Don't try to make them comfortable again. Just recognize it for what it is. Proof that you've transcended their limited vision of who you were supposed to be. Evidence that you've caused wonderful, irreversible damage to every narrative that required your smallness to function. And keep going. Because the version of you that caused this much damage, that's not your final form. That's just the beginning. And they have no idea what's coming next. Neither do you, really. But unlike them, you're not afraid of finding out. You're ready to become. And becoming. That's the most dangerous thing a person can do.